Hello, everybody. Today is a special episode in English for the first time with Lucie Battaglia. She will talk to us about the ad hoc terminology research search method. Very interesting indeed. And Lucie, could you tell us what is this method, please? We look forward to hearing it from you.
Yeah, so hi, welcome everyone. This is the first version of this presentation I'm giving in English. I prepared this in French originally for a group of students at Concordia University, so it's kind of more entry level. I tried to include more technical examples for the advanced translators among you. The search method is an acronym that represents 6 steps to follow when you need to find one term on the spot. You don't have much time, and you don't want to do a full vocabulary research. You just need to find that one word. So I'll start with a few reminders in terms of terminology research, and then we'll dive into the method, and I'll explain to you why we use it, among others, new concepts, new innovations, obscure terms, many reasons. So let's jump into it. Reminder number 1, these might seem basic to you if you have a lot of experience in translation, but it's always nice to have a few refreshers. Understanding is key. In a work scenario, when you're under pressure, you might be tight on time and feel like rushing it or translating a term literally without looking into it too much. But don't try to play guessing games. Bad idea. It might lead to a nonsensical translation and completely obscure the meaning of your sentence. A little example in the mining sector, you have the term in French, câble d'extraction. So it's part of the equipment, the machinery to pull the ore out of the ground. If you see it and feel like translating literally by extraction cable, you'll be making a mistake because it's not used for extraction before hoisting out of the ground. So you're going to do a quick Google search with your term in between quotes, add a few keywords, definition, and then the name of the field. Image search, very useful here. Picture is worth 1,000 words. So here, while you have a little vision of what your câble d'extraction is, and you can gather either based on your knowledge or based on other sources that it corresponds to what we call a hoisting cable. So once you know the definition of your term, you can tap into your existing knowledge. Have you seen this before? Does it ring a bell? If not, you can move on to official sources like Termium, Grand Dictionnaire Terminologique, or any specialized glossaries you might have. If that doesn't lead to anything, we're going to be using the search method we'll see shortly. So don't be this guy. Someone who translated a term without looking it up. Reminder number 2, this one applies mainly to the GDT and Termium, but also to some specialized glossaries on the market. Avoid obsolete, non-official, or questionable terms. So language is evolving constantly, and I'm going to remind you to check the date on every record, especially if you translate in IT or any fast-moving field. Medicine's another one, automotive. I pulled an example from the oil and gas sector, which is pour essai de congélation in French. The GDT suggests mercury freezing test, which is almost not in use. You will not find anything about it in legit sources online. It's obsolete. But some old terminology can be good in fields that move perhaps a bit more slowly, like building engineering. You just have to check if the term's in use. Reminder number 2, again, as for non-official terms, this is for Termium especially. I don't know if you've ever noticed the little marks in gray underneath the terms that say either correct, proposal, or avoid. You want to be mindful of those. If something says proposal, you want to either steer clear of it or make sure it's used by your client or used on the web in general. But if you see avoid, then try to be mindful of that mark. I added an example. I don't know if you can see it well on the right. The record is for relais in French for climbing equipment. You have belay stance, which looks perfectly fine, but it's actually marked to avoid because it's not very specific for that thing you're describing. And then you want to avoid questionable terms. That's what I call anything that can cause an ambiguous, nonsensical, or hilarious translation. Sadly enough, we don't have many of those in English. That's more of an issue when you translate into French, but there can be a few traps, a few records in Termium I found in my work that if you use them, you might not seem professional. Like la poudre aux yeux, general expression, they give you lot of bull, which is best avoided unless you're doing subtitling and you're using slang. Again, you have three-peat, which is not very much in use as far as I know. You have tumbler dryability. You wouldn't exactly put that on a label unless it becomes a popular expression one day.
But Lucie, it's correct. Tumbler dryability.
Dryability, it's not very much in use.
But it's not in use, so we cannot, okay.
We'll see that with the search method. There's one step where you actually go and check if it's in use, if it's part of common language.
Okay. Thank you.
Like I was saying, you're in luck if you translate it into English because questionable terms are a rampant issue in French. You have a lot of expressions that come out of English, and the OQLF tries to be clever with things like visionnage boulimique for binge watching, bouquin for blog book. I would stay away. Reminder number 3. Often you will have multiple possibilities for one term, even within the same field of study. Like conduite in a civil engineering report, or in any document related to a building, building plans, building inspections, etc. It's not always going to be a pipe or a conduit or a main, which might be a reflex. So you want to go in a specialized glossary. Here I have one. It's written very small in the source, but it's the Dictionary of Building and Civil Engineering by Don Montague. So you want to check a specialized source before you use something by reflex, like I was saying, pipe or conduit for conduite. Here, look at the many possibilities we have for les types de conduites in French. I put an example sentence from a true example, but reworded for confidentiality. La ville a construit un nouveau poste de pompage des eaux usées et mis en place une conduite de refoulement. So here we're talking about a pumping station. So based on the hints you have in the glossary, it says if it's from a pump, it's a delivery main. Another example would be compensation in French in the field of sustainable development. As a French to English translator, I'd be very tempted to translate it by offsetting every chance I get, but it's not always correct. Offsetting is used mainly in reference to carbon, but when we're talking about compensation in ecosystems, mitigation might be more appropriate and is more in use. Like in my example below, I have une compensation sous la responsabilité du titulaire when the landowner has to take care of restoring ecosystems on their property. It would be permittee responsible mitigation. So a pitfall to avoid is when you have that first record in Termium that seems okay, I'm going to use it, but you might have the perfect equivalent right below or in some other specialized source. So let's dive into the search method, which we use for new concept and obscure terms. So more and more, you're going to have terms that you come across and you can't find them in Termium, in the GDT, in your client's translation memory, and so on. So that's going to be the case for fast-moving industries. If you work into English, you're in luck because English leads the way. But it's not always the case. I find some fields like social sciences or gastronomy, culinary science are full of seemingly intraduisible terms in French. I put a few here in the screenshot. So let's do a little interactive exercise if you feel comfortable. You can also shoot your ideas anytime during the presentation. Write down a French term you once had trouble translating and could not find in the GDT or Termium, or in any specialized glossaries.
You want us to jot down an example right now?
If it pops to mind, just put
okay.
one term you had trouble translating and could not find in any official sources.
This is this one, assurance wrap up.
Okay, yeah, we
talked about that during the meeting.
It's an interesting one because it's what I call a faux anglicisme. It's a false Anglicism because in English you don't call it wrap up insurance. It's do you remember the exact
the acronym was OPIC, but the exact I can give you just a moment. It's in the construction industry. It's a kind of an insurance that covers all kinds of damages to reputation, to physical damages, and things like that. And it's that's why in French it's wrap up. It's une assurance qui.
Okay, it's like the full package, but it has
that's it, full package. But the right name. Okay.
Good one.
OPC. I don't know if I find it. No, I couldn't find it. Sorry. Okay. Sorry.
It's a good challenging one, and if something pops to mind later on, feel free to drop it in the chat. For these kinds of terms, for when that happens in your work life, you can use what I've dubbed the search method. That was a challenging one to translate into English.
Okay, Laurence.
Thank you, Laurence.
You found the
assurance wrapped up on the insurance website, both in English
Laurence, she's our specialist of insurance. Yes, she works. Okay. Go ahead, Laurence.
It says when I click on the website, it says wrap up liability. It's a insurance website that is explaining what is a wrap up liability.
Okay. And on this site, I see that they use wrap up, but in the text that it's this website of Vicda. I guess it's a insurance company.
It seems so, yeah.
Okay.
I didn't know the insurance company, but it seems to be one.
Okay. And okay, so it interesting. So it exists also in English. Is it?
Yes, exactly.
Very used.
So I'm going to get back to the method itself. So it's 6 steps you follow in that particular order. You have to go from the S to the H, and first you have scouting the client site, explaining the concept. These will kind of always apply. Then you have a few other tips, such as using synonyms, acronyms, and associated terms, refining your Google search, and then finally checking with the client and harmonizing with usage. So before we get into what each step is all about, quick reminder, if you use it, always note down your sources in a shared glossary if you're collaborating with people or for your own reference. So scout the client site. The client's always right, and you want to use their terminology first and foremost. If their site is translated, you can either use the search bar on their website or use the Google search operator site:client.com, all together, no spaces. And that operator will filter Google search results to only your client's site. I find that works better than going on the client site itself because the search algorithm is better developed, but I invite you to try both. So we'll do a fictional example where our client is the city of Montreal and we need to translate revalorisation de terrain. So you're going to put it in quotes, guillemets anglais, not the chevron we have in French. And then you put site : ville de Montréal, ville.montréal.qc.ca. Then the first result that pops up with revalorisation des terrains, you click on it and you end up on the page where you have two choices. You can either change FR to EN in the URL or use the language toggle, which is usually going to be in the top right corner. So to conclude our example, I found the English translated version of that page, which uses land redevelopment. So that's what the client wants, that's what we use. But if your client's site is in French only, you can use their website to gain an explanation of the concept, figure out more what it means, and move to the next step. The E in search stands for explain the concept. This strategy applies to every term you cannot find. And the first step, of course, is to know what you're talking about and to have a visual mental image of it. A few starting points are Google and Wikipedia. They're not the be-all, end-all. Once you've gleaned a first explanation, you want to go to more legitimate sources, such as government or subject matter expert websites. We talked about mining and natural resources earlier. You have NRCan, which is the ministry just for that. Their site is quite complete, full of information. You have in IT, you have IBM, you have the Microsoft site that can be a good reference. Also, I work a lot with sustainable development, so the UN website helped me find some good terminology. Also, you have official standards, like the ISO standards, if you're translating more technical stuff for building engineering, for instance. That can help you quite a bit. And only if time permits, these are not the most user-friendly sources to navigate, but you can read through just quickly university thesis using Google Scholar, Thesis Canada, or a few other databases like Open Access. Very reliable, but like I said, hard to navigate. Here's an example with explaining the concept. It's from a real life work scenario that I encountered the term basilaire. It is in the GDT in Termium, but the record in Termium said that the literal translation using basilaire in English only applies to one specific building, not any others that have the same structure. So I had to keep looking. And I looked for a definition of basilaire, which is a section à la base d'un édifice composé d'une ou de plusieurs étages, plus large et plus spacieuse, d'où émerge la tour. So it's a short building on which the tower rests. And I picked out a few keywords, fed those keywords into Google, tried a few combinations, and it led me to an explanation of what we call a podium in English. And that was exactly based on the pictures, based on the explanations. It was the same thing. And it backed up actually the GDT's alternate suggestion, which was podium. So once you know what you're talking about, it's much easier. If the explanation of the concept doesn't lead you to the right solution, you can work around with antonyms, synonyms, and associated terms. So see if the term reminds you of something you already know or something you found in Termium before. Or something that happens more often than not is the client uses their own version of a common term. So, or they plain make a mistake. And then you'll be able to, you won't be able to find it in official sources. In that case, you have to play with the expression a little bit, try to see what they could have meant. For example, a French writer used the Anglicism opérateur for a job offer looking for un opérateur ou une opératrice de niveleuse. The correct term in French for that is un conducteur ou une conductrice, since it's something you drive and, hold on. Yes.
Oh, okay, Laurence, yes, you have something to
Yes.
say?
John Deere
Oh,
is opérateur.
yeah, I remember because I used to translate stuff like this content related. Sorry.
Yes.
John Deere, you work on text of John Deere's, and they use
Yes.
opérateur, John Deere?
Yes.
Okay.
Huh. See, that's an issue
That's
because
interesting.
those who write the job offers, they don't usually have the same training we have, and all the what we call the caches, les faux amis, and anglicisms, they don't know to avoid them. So if you replace opérateur with the synonym conducteur, you're able to find on Termium grader operator, which is exactly what you need. Another example, some terms are too recent to be found in official sources, like in IT and artificial intelligence and so on, but they're based on the same structure as well-known phrases. I read a document about biases in AI in my own personal reading, and I came across biais de sélection. So based on my knowledge of other biases like biais de confirmation, confirmation bias, I was able to infer that biais de sélection would be a selection bias. And then I validated to see if we actually say that in English, and yes, selection bias happens if a data set's examples are not chosen in a reflective way of the real world.
I see you have used Datafranca.
Data Franca is a fascinating source. It's a bilingual bilingual AI glossary, and it's quite complete.
Canadian, Quebec.
Yes, Montreal based, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, so you're going to see the link in the presentation, which will be shared with you after the presentation. If you can't find anything using antonyms, synonyms, or associated terms, you can then move on to the R of search, which just to put you in context, in French, the tip is called Recherche Google Page en Français. It's a shortcut workaround where you use Google's filtering option to see only pages in French. I tried to rework it for English, and I managed to come up with something. And in English, we just call it refine your Google search. So it's a shortcut where you will input your French term in quotes in the search bar, and then add 2 or 3 keywords, but in English, so that Google takes you to English language pages that use the French term and will often give you the equivalent. So it's very useful for fields where the borrowed French term is also used in English. I was talking about translating menus and the whole culinary world earlier. I came across haricot coco in my work. I could not find it in any dictionaries, any databases. So I used that little strategy with the keywords French gastronomy, because the project itself was a French menu. And it took me to a blog article. I know, not the most reliable source, but I was able to validate with other resources later. And it allowed me to find the expression, well, it's what we call cranberry beans. Image in point. I have another example of this fun strategy with electronics. So I'm really fascinated by everything repairable, sustainability related and whatnot. So I created an example with the Fairphone, which is the smartphone, the first repairable smartphone. I saw the example, the term indice de réparabilité. So indice de réparabilité is not found in Termium, in the GDT. It does not have an official translation in IT glossaries that I know of. So I put it in quotes, and I added keywords such as electronics, repairs, and France, because it's a notion that's only in France for now. We don't have that in Quebec. And I found 2 pages that gave me this same equivalent for l'indice de réparabilité, which is a score out of 10. In English, we call it repairability index scores.
Okay, you found it, okay, on that page, and then you came to realize that it was repairability index score.
Yes, because
Okay.
if your indice is something from that you can measure as 8 out of 10, it's not the index. The index is the tool you use to measure the score.
Ah, and score is the result. Okay.
Yes.
Great.
And you also have a Microsoft page that pointed me in the same direction.
Okay.
For refining your Google search, search operators will be very useful, like the quotes to find the exact expression. You can also use the minus sign. If, let's say you're looking for an IT related term and Google gives you a bunch of results that are either general, really left field, or related to some other field like medical imagery, I don't know. You can use the minus sign to exclude the keyword that's bringing up all that noise. Otherwise, you can filter by file type using file type : no space. For instance, you have PDFs that tend to be more reliable. Also, you have your good old Boolean operators and or to include all or some of your search terms. Let's say you're using the strategy I gave you with the French term in quotes and English keywords. You can put and between your English keywords so Google picks them all up.
Okay.
And gives you more English results with the French term. Also, you can use the asterisk as a wildcard if you have almost figured out your perfect term, but you're missing either a preposition or some extra detail. Like the other day, I had to translate système d'eau pluviale, but I find stormwater system is far too vague. What does it do? So I put stormwater asterisk system, and I found that it's much more common to say stormwater drainage system for what I was trying to describe in my text. And with all of that, if you still can't find anything, which might happen, you can check with the client. In a real life situation, your client will be glad to help. You just have some best practices to follow. So if you're translating a longer document, it's best you go through it and pinpoint everything, every precise term you don't think you'll be able to find, research them, and then make a list of questions asking the client for whichever ones you feel stuck on. And then you're going to send that list to the client in one email. Or if you work for a firm, you send your project manager your list of questions. A challenge is if your client speaks French only. So you're going to ask the client for a clarification of the term if you can't find anything online. And then you propose a back translation, which is you suggest the term, I would translate by X, which is literally Y in French. That's something that can be very useful if your client use their own version of non-standard terminology, and it happens in real life, and you won't be able to find anything on Google for it. So in that case, you're going to need an explanation from the client. After you've done that, and the client has answered you, hopefully, if you're hesitating between two terms, you're going to harmonize with usage, meaning you're going to check if it's used in real life scenarios. So you're going to put both your propositions in between quotes and see which one lands the most hits on Google. Here I have a stormwater drainage system and rainwater drainage system. I found that stormwater is much more common, so I use that. And even if you're not hesitating between two terms, if you you find something but you think it sounds really strange, you can use that strategy and see if it's commonly in use, or if it's something your client made up, which is nothing wrong with that, but it might not be common usage. And the best scenario, you're going to have a coworker who masters the field that you're translating about. Let's say you come across a tough financial or insurance term. It's not your usual realm of expertise, but you have a coworker who masters it. Send them a little message on chat and see if they answer. Also, you can check if your term is in use in reliable sources that are not translations. So anything written originally in English, it can be a government website, just not the Quebec government one, because that's all originally in French, or standards like Les Normes ISO that we saw earlier, leading company websites, and so on and so forth. So that concludes the search method. You won't need to go through all 6 steps for every difficult term you find, I guarantee it. The more you use it, the more you'll develop reflexes and see which step of the search acronym would apply to so-and-so. And here we
I have
are.
a comment on the frequency. You can also use diatopics to check
Yes.
the frequency.
Is diatopics quite well developed for English? I think so.
Yes, all English, Canadian, British, and American. Yes, I would recommend it.
That's worth noting, actually. I'm going to add that to the PowerPoint before I send it to you all, because diatopics can help you see if something's in use in Canadian French or UK or US. Let's say your client's in the US and the term you want to use is mainly used in the UK. Diatopics will tell you that, and that means sadly you have to continue your search.
And if you don't, there's nothing in Canadian English. For instance, in French, if there is nothing in Quebec, Canadian French, there is a tab which is called Francophonie, and you can see what is used in Switzerland, in Belgium, and other parts of the Francophonie. I guess it's the same thing in English. I don't know.
Exactly. I tried it for UK and US English, but I don't know it well enough to give you more specific advice. So,
and what about the exercise, Lucie? You have exercise which we can ask you to. You can ask you those 3 questions and.
Yes, I do have an exercise sheet to put in practice the search method. Normally that one I keep for the mentorship program with Sylvie.
Yeah.
But I'd be glad to share them. The only thing is I'm working on more technical questions for English, because like I said, this was originally developed for a group of French, English to French translators.
Interesting. Do you have any other questions? Anybody ask comments or question to add?
Not for the moment.
Laurence, you're working in insurance right now.
Yes, and when it's when there's a moment that are not really occupied, I help other team.
Okay, so it could help your team, other teams to use that search method.
Yes.
Where you work. Okay,
yes, it could help any team because where I work, Traduction Serge Beller, they have a lot of field. It's not just one.
Yes. Do you have group chats where your coworkers write down terminology questions and you can help each other out?
Yes, we have that, yes.
Those are great.
Oh, yes, there's some people that know insurance more than I. It really helps when I encounter some words that are really difficult.
Is it as difficult as legal translation?
No, legal translation is my it's not my cup of tea. I'm not really good with it, but sometimes they have some in insurance and I return it because I know that I'm not really good with it. At
Okay.
least I have the possibility to refuse something that is not for me.
Yes,
That's the
great.
right thing to do. Actually, legal scares me as well. It's not something I work in right now.
Mhm.
So that's why there are no legal examples in this presentation.
Or
Yes.
I know that I'm horrible with legal, so I avoid it as much as possible.
Yes,
Good
it's
to know
quite
your strength.
difficult. Yes.
Yeah, it's not my strength.
And you, Vladislav, do you have any comment or question?
It's very clear, concise, complete. Great job, Lucie. I really appreciate it. This is exactly what I need to improve my search and methods and in general my work. Thank you so much.
Let me
Uh,
know how it goes, and we'll be speaking again because you're doing the mentorship program.
Yes, yes. And could you, since we have a few minutes ahead, could you tell us why you conceive, you developed this method?
Oh, yes,
How
actually,
come? How come?
it goes way back. I was working for a translation company years ago, Oxo Innovation, and I was asked to explain my method for terminology research to my fellow translators because I always managed to find the right term really quickly. And I didn't have the method all written down. I had to structure my thoughts, kind of codify what I was doing. And then I'm like, why don't I make a clever little acronym with it and create a method? So that was that. I prepared the training for the company initially, and then skip to 3 years later in 2021. I was invited to be a guest speaker in a terminology course at Concordia, and I got permission from my former employer to share this method with the class, which I did, and the class quite appreciated it. And following that, Sylvie discussed with me about the possibility of sharing the search method on her podcast.
Yes, because in my mentorship program, I realized that the coaches, they have, that's very difficult for them, research in terminology, even though they have followed 1 or 2 courses of terminology at university level. They have problems using the concept they learn at the university and use them on the work market.
That's
So,
a real problem, actually. I finished my studies in 2016, and in my terminology class, we did mostly thematic research, recherche thématique, which is where you develop a whole glossary. And
Yeah.
if that puts you in perspective, we had to go to a library to do our terminology research.
Okay.
And that was just 7-8 years ago.
Yes, and maybe it's still the case. We don't know. We're not at the university right now. I have another question to ask you. According to you, how many minutes a translator should spend on a term? 1 hour, 1 hour, 15 minutes, 30 minutes?
Oh my goodness, there's so many variables here. I'm a freelancer and I charge by the word, so I can allow myself to spend I have literally spent an hour researching some terms before. But if you work for a company, it's best to use the collective hive mind to brainstorm with your colleagues in a group chat, because if you're on your own, even if you have the search method, you could be dealing with something that it is so new that there's almost no information online. So yes, it can take up to an hour, but ideally you should aim for between 5 to 10 minutes, and make sure when you find your solution, you share it with everyone on the same project as you.
Yes, exactly.
They told us about 5 to 6 minutes for searching, and if we don't find anything, to ask question or to send it to a terminology team.
Oh, you have a terminology team. Not everyone has that luxury. You're really lucky.
Yeah, I'm really happy that they have a terminology team.
Okay. Yeah. And the answer, they add them in their term base. It's the terminology team that is responsible for adding the results in the term base.
Yes. So what happened is
Wow.
when I have a word that I struggle with, I put it on a word sheet, a Word document. I put all my word at the end and I send my question to the terminology team, and they do the research and they enter the
Okay.
information.
Because when you don't have that kind of team, it's the translator or the reviser who has to make that job, to
Yes.
enter, to add it. It's, okay, it's very
Yeah.
important.
Something else that can be very helpful is if you don't have a terminology team, you can ask the person who will be revising you, because it's kind of a given the person who is revising will have a bit more knowledge. So together you might be able to work together and find something quick.
Yes, first step, the reviser, yes, the reviser, and then the chat.
Oh, and your reviser will absolutely adore you if you note all your sources as you translate.
I
Speaking
always,
as a reviser.
yes, two links, generally. That's what I teach my my coaches, 2 links in the bubble, the comment bubble. And one from the GDT or Termium, if so, and another one from the client side or whatever, a thesis or a technical document.
Yeah, that's it's always going to be really appreciated by the person who revises you or by the client if they will have a look at the text.
That's it.
I had 21 questions for a document today.
Oh my God.
Yeah, because I had no context. I was like, what?
Oh,
But the client seems happy that I ask questions. So.
oh. Yes, that's another problem we have in companies, in translation companies. They tend to have problems making the difference between a translation and a terminology project, because clients, they send us terminology lists and they say, oh, just translate, and the PM thinks it's normal that it's a translation, but the translator, wow, what it's pretty it takes a long time to make a translation, a terminology project. It's far more longer than a translation project.
And something else I wanted to mention, which it was one of the slides I had originally, but I took it out to keep the focus on the most important part, is if you have the time, let's say you're a freelancer, you charge by the word, or you work for a company that lets you have some reading and education time, you can read a report or an informative document about the topic your translation is about. It might seem like a waste of time, but trust me, as you get into your translation, the work's practically going to do itself, because you have the base understanding and you've read something about it in your target language.
Yes. And I may add that we are going, Lucie and I, make a podcast in September on the use of the search method and the chat GPT. We're going to develop that approach. It's a new approach, but we have to deal with ChatGPT nowadays. And Lucie, you told us that we would have to think about the legal aspect, not to because of the confidentiality of the text. We have to translate.
You don't want to give ChatGPT your client's confidential content, basically.
So don't ask ChatGPT to translate your text. That's what it means.
Oh, you might be in for a horrible result, but even asking ChatGPT to extract the technical terms, what we call in French un dépouillement, even that might be problematic, because you're giving the AI access to something that's supposed to be confidential.
But you can use the concept that with your method, we make our own dépouillement, and then we
Yes.
search the French equivalent. But you would recommend us to use the English concept because ChatGPT is more convenient in English than in French.
Well, I haven't tried it extensively, but I have noticed that ChatGPT seems more fluent in English.
Okay.
The French is still a bit rudimentary. Well, it's still pretty good, but compared to the English, I haven't found it as good. Though one step that ChatGPT might be really good for is the E in search, which is explaining the concept. You can ask ChatGPT, what is a basilar or basilaire building?
That's it. You could have, but you have to pay attention because ChatGPT invent information. It can give you false information, so you have to
double check.
Exactly.
It's like a machine that you ask to translate something. Not that I ever do it, but the machine can't think as sharply as a human.
So I would recommend to start with the search method and then go to ChatGPT and not the other way around.
Yeah, and I'll be trying it out just to especially to ask ChatGPT what is acronym, because it tends to explain things very simply.
And there are keywords in French. I didn't test it in English. To make a conceptual card,
map.
Sorry, which is the reflect of all the knowledge in the text we are translating. So that's the approach I'm going to develop this summer with, and we talk again together about that, Lucie.
All right, so I'm gonna take one more question if someone has one. If not, I was thinking we could wrap up.
There are the comments. Ladislav, Eric. Okay, thank you very much, Lucie.
Merci.
And merci beaucoup. Et,
Thank you very much, Lucie.
je vais mettre l'enregistrement sur la page de Translator et sur la chaîne YouTube de Translator. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you everyone. Merci tout le monde. Bonne soirée.
Vous aussi.